How worried are you about the left side of that offensive line?
Well, I'd be really worried that you're tossing the keys to left tackle to Geron Christian. You just have to hope that in year 3 that he's ready for such a big responsibility. Because at times in his first 2 years, anytime you mentioned playing Geron Christian, it wasn't with, notes of positivity attached to it. It was kind of like with, we got to play Geron Christian. It's not a great thing. So hopefully he's ready for that. And it sounds like Wes Martin is making a bid to be the starting left guard next to Christian. So, you should be concerned about the youth and inexperience on the left side of that line. I'd be worried about it.
I'm worried about the right side. I thought the right side was worse than the left side last year. So I'm worried about the right side. The whole line is basically a disaster. It's basically a disaster. They still haven't come to any sort of contract agreement with Sheriff, right?
Correct.
So who knows?
He's tagged. He's going to be here this year.
He's going to be here this year, but after that it gets crazy. Chase Rouillet seems to be fine, but Morgan, we had Morgan on the show every week. Great guy. He struggled last year. Let's be honest. Wes Martin got grilled just yesterday, or 2-3 days ago, by Coach Rivera. Got called out in front of everybody for not taking advantage of his opportunities. Christian, as Cakes mentions, is a ginormous question mark, who's been a huge disappointment for the first 2 years.
Pick.
Yeah, it's still third round. Pretty much by now you should be contributing.
Right, you want him to be, at least a depth guy, if not a starter.
Well, it looks like he might be their starting left tackle.
It's looking that way.
Put it this way. Everybody talks about the receivers and how sort of not NFL caliber the receivers are. The offensive line is a dumpster fire, if you ask me. It's a bigger dumpster fire.
That's why I brought it up, that we really haven't been talking about it. We've been talking about the issues at tight end and the issues at wide receiver. And this was an offense that struggled all of last year. They couldn't score points. And you're expecting, better year from Dwayne Haskins. You're at least hoping for it, that Dwayne Haskins will be able to hook up with McLaurin and Logan Thomas and these guys, Gandy Golden, Gibson, all of these guys. You're hoping it happens, but he may not have a chance.
Well, I think
the offensive line is in shambles.
I think part of what you're going to see from this offense, especially early in the season, is there's a reason that your depth chart outside of Adrian Peterson at running back, that all of the guys that are involved, McKissick, Bryce Love, Gibson, all those guys can catch passes out of the backfield. Because if the offensive line deteriorates quickly, you're not going to be able to find McLaurin streaking downfield or find Gandy Golden or Inman. You're going to need to go to your safety valves and your running backs out in the flats. So I think that's going to be a big part of this offense, especially early. And I don't think it's a mistake that you have a bunch of guys in that backfield while some of them are unproven, especially Gibson and Love. Those guys can catch the balls out of the backfield from Haskins. There's a reason for that.
It's interesting because when you look at the makeup of the team, as big a dumpster fire as the offensive line is, the defensive line is kind of the strength, right?
Absolutely.
So they've done an okay job building that side. But the offensive
they've drafted a bunch of guys in the first round.
Right. But the offensive line, it's just been kind of somewhat neglected. Somewhat.
Well, some of these guys, Christian, Martin. So let's say the left side ends up being Geron Christian and Wes Martin. These are guys they drafted.
But Martin was late.
In the first round. Sure,
Christian was a third rounder, which is a legit pick.
I think Martin's a fourth rounder, right?
Was he a fourth? He was that high?
To look it up.
He was a fourth rounder, yes, in 2019.
So they are guys you drafted. You just didn't draft them in the first round. So you're hoping that they develop. But look, they're going to most likely, because if you look at the guys behind them on the depth chart, they're just a bunch of journeymen. I mentioned the two guys that were just cut. You're right, Cakes. They're probably just bodies so that they can, have practices, really. If you've got Sadiq Charles.
Well, so you need backups.
If you got Sadiq Charles, who hurt his calf, he's going to be a part of the team, okay? They just drafted him.
Sure.
But if he's hurt for a significant amount of time and you want to have, practices with a bunch of snaps, you have to have a second unit.
I can't remember
right now
tweeted.
They don't have a second unit.
Can't remember who tweeted the video, but they were like, look, the offensive linemen are running, and even Sadiq Charles is running. Like him just running like a 10-yard half sprint was like a big deal. But I guess for him to get back to health. He needs to take some baby steps before he's out on the field full time.
Yeah, the only video I saw yesterday of the offensive line in particular was Brandon Sheriff dropping back for passes for some reason.
Right.
That was the video that was out there on social media. Anyway, if I'm a fan of the Washington football team, I'm somewhat terrified about the offensive line because last year there were question marks and everybody was like, "Oh, well, Trent Williams is going to come back."
Yeah, you know what?
He's gone. He's never coming back.
Not coming back. It's a good thing that Dwayne Haskins got into better shape this offseason. Now, he showed some shiftiness as a rookie, but, losing some of that weight and gaining some speed, it's going to help him when that line breaks down in front of him. If he needs to escape the pocket, gain a few yards, get away from the oncoming pass rush, I think him being a little more svelte is definitely going to help him in season 2.
That might have been some of his thinking. He's like, man, look at this old line. I'm going to have to run my ass off.
That could have been some of the motivation, sure.
Yeah, to create some time here.
Right.
Look, I think that they're in some decent, stead in certain positions. But I agree with JP. I think the offensive line is going to be their biggest issue. It'll be the single biggest issue.
But you're right, though. Last year, the right side of the offensive line, Sheriff, he's a name and he's solid at times, but I don't think he's lived up to the hype. And Morgan Moses, you said, was a disaster. Last year, at least, you had Eric Flowers, who surprised us all.
Yep.
On the left side at guard.
And Donald Penn held up. He did okay. He did okay. The left side was the strength of the line last year. Fact.
Yeah. So Geron Christian and Wes Martin, they were the backups to Eric Flowers and Donald Penn.
Right.
And now they're likely to be the starters.
Right.
And
it's
not like
that happens.
Donald
Guys
Penn
get better.
Sure.
I remember Morgan Moses' first year or two
honest.
was pretty bad, and then he stepped up and became pretty darn good.
I was floored by how good Flowers was because he was like a turnstile coming into Redskins camp last year. He was basically a joke.
He was, but he was a tackle. And they moved him inside, and it benefited him.
It was a smart move. It's probably prolonged his career by 5 or 7 years.